Hey, what's up? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm gonna be doing my next thriller recommendations video. I know that this video is a little bit early because I don't usually make this video until October. I try to do this video like every 6 months on my channel, and so they usually come out in April and October. But I had to post this a little bit early because I already have so many thriller recommendations that it's getting out of control, and I need to do this video before I read any more thrillers that I could possibly recommend because this video is just, it's a lot. Like, there's so many thrillers I want to go over in this video, and so I hope you don't mind that it's a little early, you know? Let's get the spooky season started. But before we do jump into the books, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, which is Ana Luisa. You've probably heard me talk about Ana Luisa a couple times now because they're a jewelry brand and I am just absolutely obsessed with their rings. But not only does Ana Luisa do rings, they also have bracelets, necklaces, earrings, all sorts of things. Something that I think is really special and unique about Ana Luisa is the fact that they are a sustainable brand because they offset 100% of their carbon emissions. They also send all of their jewelry in these really small, environmentally friendly bags, and they get shipped in the tiniest little box. Ana Luisa jewelry is a great gift for yourself if you're looking to treat yourself, or it is a really great and thoughtful gift for a loved one. And they make for really great gifts because they look very luxurious, but they're actually very cheap because there's no luxury markups. They start at $39 and up. They offer speedy delivery all around the world, and their prices are fair. All of their products are very long lasting and they make them with care, and you can really tell because I've had some of my Ana Luisa pieces for over a year now and they still look brand freaking new. They use only the best noble metals, and they also do offer a 365-day warranty. The 3 pieces that I chose this time were all rings because, as I've said before, I'm a huge fan of their rings and I really love the simplicity of their rings. The first one that I chose is this gold band, and that's pretty much exactly what it is. It's just this really beautiful gold band, and I got this one a size bigger so that I could fit it on all of my fingers because sometimes I find that a lot of my fingers are different sizes, and I really like the ones that look really simple like this because it's easy to mix and match them with other rings on your fingers. And then I got this rope mini, which I do have another ring that looks like this one, but this one's even thinner than the other one, which I really like. This one's actually really cool because it's a one size fits all ring because it's an adjustable band. And then the last one that I chose is this cool like double cross ring, and this is another one that I do have one that looks kind of similar to this, but I do love that it looks like 2 rings crossed together into one ring. I just think that looks really cool, and because I just think they pair really well with other rings. Like, as you can see, they just all look so nice all together. So alone they're kind of simplistic, but together they just look really fancy. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of Ana Luisa. I highly recommend checking out their products, and you can get 10% off when you use the link in my description and my code gabbyreads10. Go and check it out, you won't regret it. And thanks so much again to Ana Luisa for sponsoring today's video. Right, so now to jump into the thriller recommendations. Like, oh my gosh, I am not kidding when I say I have a lot of recommendations to go through, so I just want to jump right into it. And honestly, if you've been actively following my channel a lot for the last 6 months, some of these recommendations might not come as any surprise to you because, you know, these are my favorite thriller recommendations that I've read within the last 6 months. But the book that I wanted to start with to recommend to you is a book that I have not mentioned at all yet on my channel because I just read it this month, and that is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. And I'm so happy that I ended up loving this book because it is a book of the month selection for the month of September, so you can get your hands on this book now if you have book of the month. Alice Feeney has always been an author that's very like hit or miss for me, and this is definitely my favorite book that I've read from Alice Feeney. This book, we're following this couple who's been married for 10 years, and they're kind of maybe on the brink of divorce. Like, they are just not that in love anymore, and so they decide to go to this chapel. They like win this trip to this chapel that's out in the middle of nowhere, and they want to try and save their marriage on this trip. This chapel is kind of creepy and spooky, and there's something going on and they don't know what. And then in alternate chapters we also do get to see these letters that she's written to her husband over the last 10 years of their marriage, which gives us some backstory on things that have happened with them. And it's really interesting because you don't know if either her or her husband are reliable narrators, because we do get both of their point of views in this story, and it just seems like there's more to this story that meets the eye, and there definitely is, because holy shit, this ending, dude, this book has a really great plot twist at the end. It actually has multiple really great plot twists at the end, and I just did not see any of that shit coming. And I was completely blown away. It was so good. The next one I wanted to recommend to you is one of my absolute god tier top favorites of the year so far. Like, this is probably going to be in my top 10 of the year. I'm just calling it now because it's Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And this book, not only is it a really great thriller, because I would classify this as more thriller and less mystery, you know, because a lot of these books do categorize as both, but this one's definitely more of just a thriller because we're following these two older guys, these two men. One of them is black, one of them is white, and they both find out that their gay sons have been murdered. Like, their gay sons were in a relationship together and they got murdered. And so this book is about how they are going to get revenge on the people who murdered their sons. And this story is really intense because not only is it a really great revenge story, and it's really, really graphically violent and gory, like way more than I was anticipating, but also this book has some really important conversations about what it means to be black in America and what it means to be gay. And it also has one of the most iconic character duos that I've ever read about. Like, Buddy and Ike are two of my favorite characters that I've ever read in a thriller novel. And this book made me cry a whole lot. It's just a really beautiful, emotional story on top of being a really great and action-packed thriller. Like, what more could you want? The next thriller that I want to recommend to you probably has the greatest vibes of all the thrillers, and we care a lot about vibes over here, you know? And that is gonna be In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This book just like came into my life and hit me like a train and just knocked me to the floor because I am trash for this book. I want to reread this book as soon as possible. Like, I might reread it again this fall, even though I just read it in August. Because this book is about a group of 6 friends. They all went to college together 10 years ago, and while they were in college, one of their friends was murdered and another one of their friends was accused for the murder. And now the 6 of them are coming back to the college because they're having a reunion of sorts, and they're trying to figure out what actually happened back in the day. And we're following this protagonist named Jessica, who we just don't know if we can trust her. She just seems kind of shady and a little narcissistic, but she's one of the most fun characters to follow because you're just like, what is going on in her head? Like, you just don't know. And there's also like a really great love triangle happening in this book. Like, this book just has it all, but it really has those like dark academia vibes, but there's romance too, and it's just so dark and moody. And on top of all of that, it has a really great plot twist. I love books like this where you kind of have a reason to suspect every single person in the book and you're just trying to figure out what's the truth. It was so much fun. One of the best thrillers I've read this year. And then I have The Plot, which this one is like one of the smartest thrillers that I've read. I just feel like this writing style felt really smart to me. And in this book, we have one of my favorite tropes, which is a book within a book, because we are following this dude named Jacob. And he was once a promising young novelist himself, but now he's a professor out of college, and he has this really cocky student come up in here and try to act like he has the best book idea in the world. And then when Jacob finds out about this book idea, he actually thinks it is a genuinely really good idea. So 2 years later, he finds out that the student has died, and so he doesn't know if anybody else knows about what his book idea was, so he decides to steal the plot of his book and publish it himself. And that's like essentially the plot of this book. The plot, do you see what I did there? Do you see? This book is just, it's so good. And it's really cool because in alternate chapters, we do get to read some of the book that this guy, you know, wrote, like the book that he stole, like the plot that he stole. We get to know about it, we get to read it, and it is a really interesting and unique story. Like, I just thought it was so cool to have the book within a book trope. And this main character was just so, like, he was almost a little bit like, you know, pretentious and just kind of like unlikable, but in the most interesting way. No, I just loved it. I loved it so much. There was good plot twists and just really good writing in this thriller. And then we have Local Woman Missing, and this is definitely my favorite book from this author so far. The other book that I read from this author was a 1 star, so I was not expecting to love this book the way that I did. This book I feel like is perfect for fans of like the classic thriller, you know? This is like a really great girl gone missing story, and then we just kind of figure out what's going on in this small town. All you really know about it going into this book is that this woman has disappeared in this small town about a week ago, and then a week later a woman and her child also go missing in this small town. And this book was just so shocking. It's like your typical thriller setup, you know, like these girls are going missing, but it just has the most crazy plot twists that you just don't see coming. So I think that's what makes this book really great. It's also just super engaging to read this book because it has like really quick chapters and there's so many different points of views. Like you get a lot of different point of views from a lot of people in the town. So it's just really quick moving and just so intense. I just loved it. I thought it was so good. And then another thriller that I just recently read that I loved and it took me so off guard was Jar of Hearts. This book, I would have never picked this book up on my own because this cover looks almost like a romance cover to me for some reason. But this book was everything. In this book, we're following this woman named Gio who she unknowingly was dating this serial killer when she was in high school, and he was responsible for murdering and butchering her best friend at the time. But then in this book, we're following her 15 years later, and in the opening chapter of this book, she's getting arrested because she actually knew that he was responsible for murdering her best friend, and she might have been involved. And so in this book, we're flashing back 15 years in the future when she's getting arrested for this shit and trying to figure out how much she knows and how much she was involved. And then we also flash back to 15 years ago when she was in high school dating this serial killer dude. And it's also interesting because we do get a detective point of view in this book, but the detective actually knew the girls when they were in high school and he actually had a crush on the main character, Gio. So like his involvement in the story is really interesting because even though he's a detective, he doesn't really read like a detective point of view to me. He read more like a close friend, you know? But this book was just, it was so good. It had so many good twists and the writing was just excellent. Another thriller that I read for that same video is this other thriller called Confessions, and this thriller is so unique and it's so hard to describe. We're just following this teacher who's talking to her class about why she's retiring, and that's pretty much all I can give you about this book because this book is a crazy ride, it's a crazy journey, and I think it's best if you go in knowing absolutely nothing. It's really cool though because this book is divided into 6 chapters, so it is kind of short, but the 6 chapters themselves are very long chapters, which is like my only issue that I had with this book because I usually prefer my thrillers to have like short and quick chapters that you can just fly through. But nonetheless, this book was very cool in the style of storytelling because each one of the 6 chapters really ended with a shocking plot twist. And I like that each chapter was kind of told from the perspective of a different character, but it was kind of following the same situation, kind of. I don't really know how to explain this book, but I just thought it was really cool. It was really unique. I was just surprised. Like, I was completely surprised by this book. The next one that I wanted to recommend to you is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. I have really enjoyed everything that I've read from Samantha Downing so far. I feel like I just found another author that I really vibe with. In this book, we're following this teacher named Teddy who teaches at this very prestigious private school. Teddy is one of those characters that is just absolutely fascinating to read from his point of view because he's kind of a terrible person, and he's just one of those characters that's almost like a Joe Goldberg type where he's just so like narcissistic and cynical, but he's just so entertaining to read from his point of view because his point of view is just so strange and unique. And the basic premise, like what happens in this book, is that people just start dying on this campus and nobody knows what's going on. And I just thought this book was so much fun. It was so entertaining to read this. There was actually a decent amount of plot twists in this book. Like I was genuinely surprised because at first I was like, okay, this book's gonna be pretty straightforward, but no, there were a few good plot twists in this book, and the ending of this book, oh my god, I was screeching. It was just so clever. It was so cleverly written. I just really enjoyed this, and I will check out anything by Samantha Downing now because, yeah, as I said, I've really enjoyed everything that I've read from her. Next one I wanted to recommend to you is actually a young adult thriller, which is rare for me, you know? I mean, I don't usually read young adult thrillers, but this one was getting so much hype in the community lately that I had to check it out, and I'm so glad that I did because it's Ace of Spades. And you know, you've probably heard about this book because everybody is loving this book on Instagram, on booktube, and on TikTok, I've heard. But in this book, we're following these 2 students who are the only, if not one of the only 2 black students on the entire campus of this school. They're at this like private academy school, so there's definitely these like academia vibes in this one as well. And they both get selected to be a part of this like elite program at the school, but things quickly turn south for them when they start getting these anonymous messages from this person that's calling themselves aces. And this book is just, it's truly terrifying. It definitely has similar vibes to Get Out. I mean, I know everything wants to compare themselves to Get Out these days, but this book compares itself to Get Out meets Gossip Girl. And even though I've never seen Gossip Girl, I feel like that's an accurate comparison because it's this like anonymous threat that they don't know who it is. And it's just really, really good. It's really well written. It's so fast paced. I will say the first 200 pages are kind of slow, at least for me personally, but the last 200 pages or so, holy crap, this book book was just crazy. And then the next thriller I wanted to recommend to you is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh. I am late to the party on this book. I know that this is a really well-known and like loved thriller in the thriller community, and I just have not gotten around to it in years. Like, I've been wanting to read this book for years and I finally read it. And this is Claire McIntosh's debut novel. And this is a thriller with a freaking punch, dude. Like, the ending of this book is so unexpected and so twisty and just craziness. In this book, all that you know about it going into this book is it starts with a hit and run. This child dies in hit and run, and then we follow the mother as she's trying to move on from this situation. We also do get a detective point of view in this book who's trying to figure out what exactly happened in this hit and run and who's responsible. And that is all you need to know going in. I thought the first half of this book, it was really interesting because it almost read more like a contemporary, even more like a romance in a way. It kind of read like a Nicholas Sparks, like beachy romance at the beginning, and I was like, okay, this wasn't what I was expecting. But then the ending got so action-packed, so dark. Like, I will warn you, this is a pretty dark thriller with some pretty intense trigger warnings. So I would look into that if that's something that you're concerned about, but damn, this book had a really good plot twist at the end. Like, I was shook. I couldn't believe it. And it definitely does live up to the hype. Like, a lot of people will hype this book up because of that ending, and you know what? I agree. It was a really great ending, and I did not see it coming. Another thriller that I read that I was really surprised by because I had very low expectations going into this is The Good Lie by A.R. Torre. And I had low expectations going into this because I previously really did not enjoy a book from this author. But this one was, oh my god, it just took me completely by surprise. Because in this book, we're following from the point of view of this woman who's either a psychiatrist or a therapist. I can't remember exactly what she does, but she's treating this guy who keeps saying that he wants to kill his wife, like, over and over and over again, and she's never really taken him seriously because he's never really acted on it. But then she gets a phone call one day saying that he and his wife were both found dead in their home. And then on top of that story that's going on, there's also these boys that have been going missing in this town, and they've been finding bodies of these boys. And it's wild because the 7th boy that had gone missing in the town shows up at his own house, and he says he had escaped. We get both of those stories happening side by side, and this book is just wild. It's really, really crazy. It wasn't one of my favorite thrillers that I've like ever read, but it was still a really cleverly written thriller, and I was genuinely impressed by a lot of the plot twists. The next 2 book recommendations that I have for you, I'm gonna be brief on them because they were both BookTube selections, and yes, I only have 2 recommendations that came from my actual thriller book club because apparently I just suck at picking books, but these 2 were probably my favorite books that I've read from my book club so far this year, and that was The Other Black Girl and The Burning Girls. The Burning Girls was our May selection, and The Other Black Girl was our June selection, and The Burning Girls is probably my favorite book that we've read for the book club so far this year, even though it was still only about like a 4-star book for me. And in this book, we're following this young reverend who moves to this small town with her daughter. There's this dark history in this town surrounding this chapel and different things that are happening in this town. Everyone in the town has something to hide, and I just really love thrillers that kind of follow a small town like this. I just thought it was really interesting. There were so many characters in this book. I almost feel like there were too many characters in this book personally. It was a little bit hard to follow at times. But nonetheless, I still had a really great time reading this, and I thought this book had some really cool twists at the end. And then The Other Black Girl, which was the June selection, I really enjoyed this book. This book follows this woman who is the only black girl in her office. She works in a book publishing industry, so that was really cool to read about as well. But the story really starts when her company hires another black girl, and so she's no longer the only black girl working in the office. And shortly after this other girl gets hired, she starts getting these anonymous notes that are telling her to leave the book publisher. And so she doesn't know who's anonymously trying to like send her these threats. And the writing in this book is just so tense. Like, I found this entire book to be very unnerving and very unsettling. I will admit I wasn't a huge fan of like where the ending of this book ended up going, and I definitely had some issues with this book, but overall I thought this was a really well done thriller, and especially because this one is a debut from this author, so I'm really excited to check out what this author is going to be writing in the future. Yeah, there you go. I mean, I actually picked 2 decent books for the book troop. Hopefully at the end of this year we have some more luck with my picks because yeah, they haven't been great so far. Sorry about that. And then the next thriller I wanted to recommend is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. This one just went on sale September 7th, so not too long ago. And this one, I will admit, it's not one of my favorite Lisa Jewell books that I've ever read, but I still was really surprised by the end of this book because I'm not gonna lie to you, the first like 150 pages or so of this book, I was considering DNFing it because I was just not interested in it. But the ending was definitely worth it, and I just grew to be so attached to these characters by the end of this book. The basic premise is that we're following this woman who has this daughter who is a teen parent herself, and the daughter goes missing. And it seems so unusual that her daughter would just go missing like this because she has her own son herself. And it's interesting because not only did the daughter go missing, but her boyfriend, who's the baby daddy, also went missing on the same night. And so in this book, we're following in 3 different timelines. We get the timeline of the year she went missing, the year before, and the year after. I personally thought the year after she had gone missing was my least favorite point of view in this book. It just kind of felt like unnecessary. But overall, I thought this was a really well done story. I mean, as I said, by the ending, I was like crying. It was really beautiful. And this reminded me of my favorite Lisa Jewell, Then She Was Gone, so I loved it for that reason alone as well. And then the next thriller I have to recommend to you is Pretty Little Wife by Darby Kane. And this one is this wild story that follows this woman who lives in this small college town where one of the college students has recently vanished and they don't know what happened to them. And then recently her husband has also disappeared. And they're trying to figure out if there's a connection between these 2 people that went missing. I will warn you that this book is pretty dark and it has some really dark trigger warnings for things like child molestation and things like that. So if that's not something that you can read, I might skip this one because it does get pretty dark and graphic in those details. But this thriller was really shocking. I think especially the ending of this book, like I will admit some of this book did drag for me a little bit because it's about 400 pages, which is pretty lengthy for the thrillers that I read. By the ending of this book, I was completely shocked by that ending, and I'm just excited to see what else this author puts out in the future because I think this one was a debut novel, but I do think this author has another book coming out in December this year. And then I did want to recommend The Perfect Family by Robin Harding, especially if you have read any of Robin Harding's books before, because usually her books end up being like a middle of the road 3-star book for me, but this one has actually been my favorite Robin Harding that I've read so far, which is really cool because in The Perfect Family, we're following this family that's the mom, the dad, and then the son and the daughter, and we get all 4 of their point of views in this book. And what ends up happening is their house keeps getting vandalized for all these weird unknown reasons, like people will throw eggs at their house or like something's always going on with their house and they don't know what's going on, why this is happening. But all 4 of them, low-key, have secrets that could explain why this is happening and why they're being targeted for something like this. And so it's really interesting to go back and forth between all 4 of their point of views because none of them can be trusted and they're all like low-key kind of shitty. And so I just thought this book was really interesting. I think Robin Harding is really great at writing characters who are just really messed up. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this one and I would highly recommend this, especially if you've been disappointed by other Robin Harding books in the past. I think this one might, it might be better for you because it was for me. And then the last book that I wanted to recommend is Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapina, and this is definitely up there as one of my favorite Sherry Lapinas. I feel like this year a lot of authors have really surprised me because these might be my favorite books from these authors. I mean, I will admit, I still think my favorite Sherry Lapina is An Unwanted Guest. That one just slaps so hard, but this one is definitely a close second. I really enjoyed this book, and I think I've read most of Sherry Lapina's books, if not all of her books. This one is really interesting because we are following this rich-ass family, and the 2 rich parents in this family get murdered. The day after Easter, they're found brutally murdered in their home, and the police have reason to suspect the 3 adult siblings for this murder because not only were they the last people to be with them on Easter Sunday night dinner, they all had this dinner that blew up in this huge fight when all the kids left because their parents were like low-key assholes. Like their parents were not great, And then all the kids are probably going to inherit a lot of money because their parents were so rich. So like it would make sense for the murderer to be one of these 3 kids. And so in this book, it kind of feels like a low-key Knives Out, because there's like inheritance money and there's murder and there's like the siblings. And this book was just really fun. I will admit, I think this book is kind of easy to predict in a way, but it's also just like such a fun thriller. Like I just thought it was really fast-paced, really interesting. And I don't know, again, I feel like I just love this in a thriller where we have reason to suspect multiple different people in a book. And I just loved it. I thought it was a really great time, even though it is a little bit predictable. Like, I didn't really mind it. I just had a really fun time reading this. Oh wow, so those are all of the thrillers that I have to recommend to you today. I told you it was a lot. That's why I'm glad to be doing this video now, because I was like, if I read one more thriller and enjoy it, this video is going to be overwhelming, if it's not already overwhelming. And I love that I was able to bring this video to you a little bit early. You'll have to let me know what you would prefer to see in October, because I was planning on doing this video in October. So instead of a thriller recommendations video, let me know what you would like to see instead for like the October video, because I'd still like to do something cool with thrillers for October. I was thinking if you'd want to see like a specific thriller recommendations kind of video, if you want thrillers that are specifically have these kind of tropes in them, then let me know if you'd like to see a video like that. Or I might just do a video that's like my all-time favorite thrillers video for October. So let me know if that's something that you'd want to see. Or if you're like, bitch, we already know because you never shut up about your favorite books, then let me know that as well, because, you know, that's valid. That's a good point. Thank you so much for watching as always. If you've read any of these thrillers, let me know your thoughts on them. If you have any thriller recommendations for me, let me know that as well. And thanks once again so much to Ana Luisa for sponsoring today's video. And don't forget to click the link in my description and use my discount code gabbyreads10 for 10% off your order. Thanks again so much for watching as always. I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.